In our headlines on this Friday afternoon, March 22nd, here in South Korea. The tug of war between government authorities and medical practitioners remains locked in place as the former calls for an end to the ongoing collective action, while the latter urges for a change in quota expansion plans. Meanwhile, US tech giant Apple faces a landmark lawsuit as the Justice Department and 16 state as well as district attorneys accuse the company of abusing its power of the iPhone App Store to lock in customers and developers. Elsewhere, Israeli military forces launched an operation targeting militants at Shifa hospital in northern Gaza starting this past Monday that has reportedly led to the capture of some 650 terror suspects, including senior Hamas officials. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo has made yet another plea to the medical arena, calling on members there to partake as partners in government efforts to reform the medical care system that allow for effective care for the public and healthy working conditions for junior doctors at hospitals. Medical practitioners, for their part, have reiterated calls for a change in the size of the medical school quota expansion. Our Moon Hye-ryan has the latest.
With medical professors also threatening to resign in protest of the government's plan to increase the number of medical students, the government is attempting to mitigate concerns over further medical staff shortages. Speaking at a meeting of the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasure Headquarters in Seoul on Friday, Prime Minister Han Duck-soo announced that the government would be deploying an additional 247 military doctors and doctors from public health centers, starting next Monday to fill the empty slot left by the walkouts. And starting next month, a senior doctor support center within the National Medical Center will be opening to provide further support by hiring senior doctors near retirement. The Prime Minister also addressed the medical professors in a plea for them to reconsider their resignations and added that the government would continue close communication.
Government will continue to communicate with an open mind. Any suggestions that help protect public health will be reflected in the healthcare reform agenda without delay.
Calls for dialogue also seem to be growing within South Korea's medical community, with medical professors due to convene again on Friday afternoon before submitting their resignations next Monday. Speaking during an interview with a local broadcaster on Thursday, the head of a group of medical school professors hinted that the professors could sit down for talks with the government and even withdraw their resignations if punitive measures imposed on junior doctors are lifted. He also called for more objective data before increasing the medical school admissions quota.
We are not opposed to increasing the number of medical school admissions per se, but we think that it could be possible if an acceptable figure is obtained through objective verification. However, the government's plan to increase the quota by 2,000 is not objective data that any doctor can accept.
Meanwhile, the Medical Professors Association of Korea has announced that it would reduce the working hours of hospital professors to 52 hours a week starting next Monday. They will also minimize outpatient treatment starting in April. The decision was made to focus more on treating high-risk patients. Also starting next Monday, the government is set to begin suspending the licenses of trainee doctors.
Starting next week, the government will enforce license suspensions for doctors who have defied the return-to-work order.
The Health Ministry has issued prior suspension notices to about 5,000 trainee doctors who must submit their responses by next Monday. Moon Hye-ryan, Arirang News.
On the security front, the commander of U.S. Forces Korea says Washington is on track to completing the transfer of wartime operational control to Seoul. Now, speaking at a Senate Armed Service Committee hearing in Washington on Thursday, General Paul LaCamera revealed that the U.S. is working on and moving forward with the transition. He stressed, however, that the transition is standards-based and not time-based. Now, Seoul handed over operational control of its military to the US-led UN command during the Korean War, which was then transferred to the South Korea-US Combined Forces Command. On the economic front, Korea's wholesale prices rose in February amid higher costs for fresh produce and manufactured goods. According to the Bank of Korea on this Friday, the producer price index was up 0.3% on month, gaining for the third month in a row. Agricultural products were largely behind the higher index, but pundits point out also that prices of petroleum and metal products, which jumped 0.5% on month in February. American tech giant Apple is poised to fight a legal battle spearheaded by the U.S. Justice Department, which claims the company stands in violation of antitrust laws with marketing strategies aimed at keeping iPhone users, quote, locked in. Our Shin Se-byuk explains.
The U.S. Justice Department, together with the District of Columbia and 15 U.S. states on Thursday, filed an antitrust lawsuit against Apple related to the company's iPhone. At a press briefing on Thursday, U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland accused the tech giant of monopolistic practices in its iPhone sales.
That Apple has consolidated its monopoly power, not by making its own products better, but by making other products worse.
He highlighted two key issues. First, Apple's imposition of contractual restrictions and fees that limit what developers can offer iPhone users. And second, its selective restriction of access to the iPhone's operating system for third-party apps and accessories. Garland criticized Apple for limiting the functionality of competitor smartwatches and hindering messaging compatibility between iPhones and Android devices, claiming these actions contribute to an unfairly closed ecosystem. The Justice Department contends that Apple has intentionally made it difficult for users to switch from iPhones to other smartphones, effectively keeping them within its ecosystem. The Attorney General warned that if left unchallenged, Apple would only strengthen its monopoly, emphasizing that consumers shouldn't have to pay higher prices due to a company's violation of antitrust laws. Following the lawsuit, Apple issued a statement saying that the lawsuit threatens the core identity and unique principles that distinguish Apple products in highly competitive markets. The company also said that if the lawsuit is successful, it could stop the production of the kind of advanced and integrated products that people expect from Apple. It could also lead to significant changes across the company's ecosystem. This might include the reduction of developer fees, allowing third-party digital wallets more freedom, and enhancing compatibility with non-Apple devices and services, potentially altering how users interact with Apple products and services. Apple joins the list of other major tech giants in the U.S. to face comprehensive legal challenges from the government alongside Google, Meta, and Amazon. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
A senior U.S. official has made note of Korean chipmakers' halt of their sales of second-hand equipment which are bundled into packages for dealers who then supply Chinese businesses. Our agent tells us what this means.
U.S. Undersecretary of Commerce for Industry and Security, Alan Estevez, said in a written statement to the House Committee on Foreign Affairs that it was encouraging to see allies and partners align with Washington amid rivalries between the U.S. and China and taking appropriate actions to address security concerns regarding semiconductors and other emerging technologies through their domestic legal systems. He was referring to the latest move from key South Korean companies, including Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix, with the firms expressing intent to stop selling used semiconductor manufacturing equipment to China, and the governments of the Netherlands and Japan also announcing and implementing controls on such exports. Estevez also emphasized the importance of having parity between U.S. companies and companies of allied nations by upholding similar controls. It was also pointed out during the House hearing that the United States has been seeking controls on the servicing and supply of components for equipment that has already been sent to China before export restrictions were implemented. In a keynote speech at a South Korea-U.S. Economic Security Conference held in Washington in December, Estevez said that the U.S., South Korea, and other allies were in preliminary talks over the idea of creating a new export control system that would prevent cutting-edge technologies from being transferred to potential adversaries. He also highlighted that existing multilateral export control systems like the Wassenaar Arrangement were failing to keep pace with quickly changing technologies. Ian-jin, Arirang News.
Over in the Middle East, a targeted raid on Al-Shifa hospital in northern Gaza by Israel's military that began this past Monday has led to the capture of some 650 militants, including senior Hamas officials. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
The Israel Defense Forces and Shin Bet security agency said Thursday that 650 terrorist suspects were captured, including several very significant senior Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad commanders, during a massive raid at Gaza's largest hospital. It added that it also killed 140 gunmen during the raid. The announcement came on the fourth day of military operations at the Al-Shifa hospital, where Israel said it captured Hussam Salameh, the commander of PIJ's observation and intelligence unit in Gaza, and his brother, Wissam Salameh, who is the head of the Islamic Jihad's propaganda unit in the region. The raid came as the Israeli military claimed that it had received information that Hamas and others were using the hospital as a hideout to reorganize their battle lines. However, Hamas accused Israel of killing dozens of displaced people, patients, and medical staff during the raid. IDF spokesman Daniel Hagari said no civilians, doctors, or medical personnel were hurt during the operation. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, during a joint press conference in Cairo with his Egyptian counterpart on Thursday, said that a major Israeli offensive in Rafah city is unnecessary and would be a mistake. The top U.S. envoy argued that such an operation would worsen the situation and that there's a better way to deal with threats posed by Hamas. Blinken added that while it looks difficult, a ceasefire agreement could be possible, as he noted that gaps are narrowing. The U.S. Department of Defense on Thursday announced that the defense chiefs of the United States and Israel will meet next week at the Pentagon. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin and his Israeli counterpart Yoav Gallant are expected to discuss the need to expand humanitarian aid to Palestinian civilians and ensure the safety of more than 1 million residents in Rafah. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Back on the local front, a high-speed rail network that reduces travel time to just half an hour between Seoul and its surrounding metropolitan area is looking to open stage 1 of its operations next week. Our Park Gun-woo went on board.
Commuting to Seoul in just 30 minutes. A new high-speed train, the Great Train Express, or GTX, is preparing to begin operations, allowing people to reach Seoul City from the greater metropolitan area in about 30 minutes.
GTX's operation will bring innovation to our everyday lives in terms of transportation.
The new train network is one of the pledges made by the Yoon administration to reduce commuting times in the capital area, with 3 lines, A, B, and C, set to open. The A line is set to begin operating partially from March 30th. People using the GTX will be able to reach Seoul from metropolitan areas much quicker. Train journeys on the GTX A line running from Suseok, southern Seoul, to Dongtan in Gyeonggi-do province will only take about 20 minutes. The same trip by car or on other public transport takes over an hour. The government plans to fully open the A line that crosses Seoul from the south to the north earlier this year, along with the B and C lines in the next several years. An official from Korea National Railway said the government is cooperating with local governments so that rail networks can be extended to other regions outside the Seoul metropolitan area to create an economically hyper-connected area that cuts across various regions. The GTX runs at more than twice the speed of subway trains, reaching speeds of 180 kilometers per hour, meaning that at full capacity, 1,062 people on board can make it to their destinations quicker. This train will run 60 times a day from 5:30 a.m. to 1 a.m., with about a 20-minute interval between each departure. The seats are 3 centimeters wider than on regular subway trains, making for a more comfortable ride. And each carriage has an air purifier, along with eco-friendly carpet on the floor. According to the Transport Ministry, the fare from Suseok to Dongtan will be 4,451, which converts to $3.36 at the current rate. However, there have been some concerns about safety at GTX stations due to the greater volume of people that will come with the new service.
I am a bit worried because Suseok is already very busy, as it is a transfer station with other high-speed trains and subways operating there as well.
Korea National Railway said it had already looked into safety concerns and used methods including simulations and is satisfied that there's no need to worry. Park Gun-woo, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, today, that is March 22nd, the world celebrates Water Day, a day set to raise greater awareness about the importance of sensible use of and equal access to water, especially amid the ongoing conflicts in different corners of the globe. Our Ian reports.
The call to save water has almost become a cliche, with most people understanding the importance of water as a precious resource for life. But it's more than just simply using less water.
That's the reason why we have set up Sustainable Development Goal number 6, Water in Sanitation, which emphasizes the multi-phases roles of water for socio-economic development, as well as environmental sustainability.
One of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals is to ensure access to water and sanitation for all by 2030. Key steps include improving water use efficiency and enhancing international water cooperation.
So then we need to think about more broadly, not only about our only daily consumption, but also any kind of impact we are giving on the environment and human development as a whole.
The theme of this year's Water Day is Water for Peace, which is significant considering the impact of conflict on the water supplies of people living in war-torn regions due to contamination or even the complete destruction of water-related infrastructure. Humanitarian aid organization MEDER tells us more.
War in Ukraine has been going on for 2 years now, and from continuous shelling and airstrikes, the water infrastructures such as boreholes and pipelines they have been seriously damaged or completely destroyed.
In Gaza, UNICEF estimates that displaced children have access to only 1.5 to 2 liters of water per day, which falls below the recommended minimum requirement for survival of 3 liters per day. This means that people, especially children, are at risk of dying from related illnesses like serious diarrhea or malnutrition, even if they survive the fighting. There are also many other forgotten crises taking place around the world that receive less attention, such as conflicts in Syria, Sudan, and Yemen.
Every year, 30 million people flee their homes because of conflict or disaster, and these people often no longer have access to water sources and sanitation services, and they become vulnerable to epidemics.
What can we do to support those in need?
People can help other people who are suffering by simply sharing information about this issue. And people can also directly support the relief efforts on the ground by donating to an organization like MEDER.
World Water Day on March 22nd reminds us of the need to save water. Everybody has the right to safe, accessible drinking water, but not everyone is able to get it. Raising awareness is the first step toward helping others and protecting our environment. 이은희, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. At the EU summit in Brussels on Thursday, pro-nuclear European leaders and energy experts called for more nuclear energy use in Europe in a political push to revive the declining nuclear industry in the region. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen stressed the urgency of combating climate change at the first ever nuclear energy summit, saying that the readily available source of low-emission electricity can help pave a cost-effective path to net zero. Von der Leyen also said that the future of nuclear energy depends on the industry's ability to deliver on time and on budget, adding that other potential avenues, such as decarbonize heat or to supply low-emission hydrogen, can help reach climate goals. The need to find alternatives to Russian gas and meet EU's climate targets is driving the renewed interest. In the US, a patient has received a transplant of a genetically modified pig's kidney, marking the first ever transplant of a gene-edited pig kidney into a living person. The patient is reportedly in recovery and expected to be discharged soon. Doctors at the Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston operated on the 62-year-old patient for 4 hours on Saturday. The patient, Rick Slayman, has been diagnosed with end-stage kidney disease and had been a patient in the hospital's transplant program for 11 years. Slayman, who suffered from diabetes and high blood pressure for many years, received his first kidney transplant from a human donor in 2018. Dr. Tatsuo Kawai, the surgeon behind the operation, said the pig organ was exactly the same size as a human kidney, saying that it was truly the most beautiful kidney I have ever seen. Doctors said that although Slayman's new pig kidney could last for years, many unknowns in animal organ transplant may result in the patient returning to dialysis if it fails. The world's oldest living land animal, Jonathan the tortoise, has landed 2 spots in the Guinness World Records. The Seychelles giant tortoise is at least 192 years old, with his caretaker saying that age is a conservative estimate. Jonathan is the oldest living land animal and the oldest chelonian, a grouping of both tortoises and turtles. He lives on the remote island of St. Helena, famously known as the site of Napoleon Bonaparte's exile. Jonathan's caretaker, Teeny Lucy, who's been on the duty for over a decade, said that Jonathan is an enigmatic tortoise who's met many of the British royal family. Kim Seong, Arirang News.
Here in Korea today, that is Friday, March 22nd, we mark the 9th West Sea Defense Day. That being said, we turn now to live coverage of the official ceremony to mark the solemn occasion taking place at Pyeongtaek, Gyeonggi-do Province this year.
고 장철이 일병 고 한주호 중위
고 서정우 하사
고 문광욱 일병
네, 이렇게 국민 여러분께서 직접 불러주신 서해 수호 55 용사는
The 55 heroes of the West Sea, they are the heroes of the Republic of Korea and the ones that we must never forget. We thank you for your noble sacrifices for the country, and we will never forget the 55 heroes who defended the West Sea. Next, the President will deliver his commemorative address.
존경하는 국민 여러분,
Honorable fellow citizens,
서해 수호 유가족과
dear bereaved families of West Sea guardians and soldiers who participated in the war. Today, on the 9th West Sea Defense Day, we are here to honor the heroes who defended the West Sea with their indomitable will. I bow my head in respect to the heroes who sacrificed their lives to protect a free Republic of Korea. I would also like to extend my deepest condolences to the bereaved families who lost their loved ones and to the soldiers who lost their comrades. The Navy's 2nd Fleet Command, where we are gathered today, is the home base that defends our West Sea and the home port of the Chamsuri 357 and Cheonan, which defended the NLL with their lives. This place is also an important base that reliably supports the security of the northwestern islands of Korea and the activities of our Marine Corps. This place is still guarded by the fighting spirits of the 55 Navy and Marine Corps heroes who died in fierce combat to defend our waters. In 2010, the Cheonan was hit by a surprise attack by North Korea, and it was rebuilt after 13 years as a frigate with stronger combat capabilities. It has returned to defend the Republic of Korea with enhanced anti-submarine capabilities and armed with state-of-the-art weaponry. The guided missile patrol gunboats, inheriting the noble names of the 6 heroes who died in the Second Battle of Yeonpyeong, reliably protect our people in the frontline waters of the West Sea. On Yeonpyeong Island, junior Marines of the late Staff Sergeant Seo Jung-woo and the late Lance Corporal Moon Kwang-wook have inherited the spirit and will of their predecessors and firmly preparing for the threat from North Korea through daily actual combat-like trainings. As Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Republic of Korea, I would like to send my heartfelt encouragement to all of these soldiers. Honorable fellow citizens and proud soldiers of the armed forces, North Korea launched a naval surprise attack in 2002 and in 2010 torpedoed the Cheonan, and in the same year it shelled Yeonpyeong Island. These are brutal provocations that are unacceptable under any circumstances. And even today, North Korea continues to threaten the West Sea and our security. Since the beginning of this year, in the West Sea, North Korea fired hundreds of artillery shells. It has called the Republic of Korea its #1 adversary and unchangeable enemy and has not hesitated to make threats. It has even declared the NLL, which has been recognized as a de facto maritime border between the two Koreas for more than 7 decades, illegal, and comments about a new maritime border. Moreover, they are distorting our normal operational activities as armed provocations, heightening tensions in the West Sea. If North Korea thinks that it can make us succumb with such provocations and threats, it is a complete misjudgment. Our military will maintain an ironclad readiness posture and respond immediately and overwhelmingly to any provocation, firmly defending the freedom of the Republic of Korea and the safety of our people. The government will further our core of the security, which are the ROK-US Alliance and ROK-US-Japan Security Cooperation. And we will also strengthen even more the solidarity with our allies. If North Korea makes reckless provocations, we will definitely make it pay a greater price. Fake peace achieved through moderate compromise cannot protect our people, but only put our security at greater risks. Our government and the military will never take a step back in the face of North Korea's provocations and threats. Fellow Koreans and the soldiers of the armed forces, we can live our daily lives with peace of mind thanks to the men and women in uniform who are guarding our security without fail. The government will continue to support and take responsibility of the soldiers who were injured while serving the country and the people, as well as the bereaved families of those who were killed in action. We will ensure that our heroes are honored. I would like to ask the Korean people to come together to encourage our military and support them. Honorable fellow Koreans, the West Sea heroes and bereaved families and war veterans, myself and the government will forever remember the heroes who defended the West Sea. We once again commemorate the 55 proud heroes who defended the West Sea, who have deeply engraved the spirit of freedom and patriotism in the hearts of the people. The West Sea Defense Day commemorates the noble spirit of such heroes and our united will for security. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. The weather is changeable these days and we need an umbrella today. Rain will start from western regions from the mid-afternoon before gradually spreading east. From tonight into tomorrow at dawn, it will rain heavily in central parts of the country along with thunderstorms. Making matters worse, the rain could be mixed with lingering yellow dust in the air. After a chilly start, temperatures will jump this afternoon despite the showers, topping out at 16 degrees Celsius here in the capital. Then it will be even warmer at the weekend, topping out at 21 degrees on Sunday, but the south coast and Jeju Island will be rainy throughout the weekend. Strong winds continue today with a dry advisory in Gyeongsang-do provinces still in place, and it should start to rain tonight in that area. Meanwhile, afternoon highs will be 2 to 8 degrees higher this afternoon, topping out at 20 degrees Celsius on Jeju Island. There is a chance of more rain early next week in the capital, but morning temperatures should turn much warmer. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions. That ends our Friday edition of the Daily Report. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session, so do stay with us. Thank you for now.
메이데이, 메이데이. 여기는 템페스트. 들리나? 들리면 응답하라, 오바.
여기는 라이트하우스. 무슨 일인가, 오바?
지금 문제가 발생했다. 아이들을 만나러 가야 하는데 길을 잃었다, 오바.
현재 정확한 위치가 어딘지 좌표로 얘기해달라, 오바.
여기 좌표는 S, I, M, P, L, Y 0322 이상이다, 오바.
큰일이네. 위치는 찾았는데 신호를 보낼 불빛이 들어오질 않아. 어떡하지?
그러니까 시간이 더 지체되면 큰일 날 텐데.
좋은 생각이 났어.
노래로 길을 알려주는 게 어때?
오, 괜찮은데? 좌표상 여기서 멀지 않으니까 소리를 따라가면 금방 길을 찾을 수 있을 거야. 근데 어떤 노래를 틀지?
템페스트라면 알 수밖에 없는 노래 있잖아. 우리 가장 사랑하는 누구 노래?
오!
한번 불러볼까?
그래.
Yeah, you know, I wanna be yours, the lighthouse. Yeah, you know, 오직 날 비추는 lighthouse.
과연 템페스트는 무사히 우리 아이들을 만나러 갈 수 있을까? Then this week simply contour.
Don't miss out.
Yeah, you know. 싱그러운 너의 lighthouse. Yeah, you know, I wanna be yours. The lighthouse. Yeah, you know. 오직 날 비추는 lighthouse.
Lotte takes a new leap beyond its boundaries. Our change will lead to better lives for all. New Lotte, the power of a better world. New today, better tomorrow. Lotte.
The world marked International Day for Elimination of Racial Discrimination this week, and in light of this occasion, we explore the causes, consequences, and countermeasures against racism. So why does racism remain rampant? Where does Korea stand in its awareness about racism and its repercussions? And what are pundits saying about Korea's transition into a multiracial community? Welcome to Issues and Insiders for this Friday. I'm Min Sun Hee. Today we revisit the issue of racism in our society and the efforts thus far to fight it. For more on this, I have Professor Cho Hee-kyung at Hongik University live on the line. Professor Cho, it's good to have you back.
Nice to be there. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Right. I also have Zelana Zimire, a lecturer at Hanyang University here in Seoul, in the studio with us.
Nice to see you. Thank you.
Right, Professor Jo, let's begin then with your thoughts on the importance of the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination.
The International Day, as UN designates, highlights certain issues. I believe last time I was on this program was actually about International Day for Women, for 8th of March. So this is a very useful advocacy tool to highlight issues surrounding the particular topic that is the focus of that day. And obviously, elimination of racism is an important issue for us today, particularly because of the increased racism and violent racism around the world post-Brexit, post-COVID, and so forth. In fact, every day should be a day for elimination of racial discrimination, but having a day designated to it, I believe, is very useful in terms of educating the public, raising awareness, highlighting the issue, and as an advocacy tool.
Right, indeed. And before we delve into the efforts then to root out racism, Zelana, perhaps you could tell us a bit about the main reasons for racism in our society.
Hi, so first, thank you for inviting me, and it's a pleasure being here. I came here as a scholar a little bit to discuss some findings that I find through my research, and also to share experience from some of my friends, and also to share best practices from other OECD countries. So you mentioned the issue of racism. I must say that racism and discrimination exist all over the world, and Korea is by no means a unique case. What is unique in Korea is that luckily we didn't see some serious cases of abuse, we didn't see hate crimes, we didn't see gang violence, but we did see some serious abuses of 3D workers, for example. And I would say that this is primarily because they are seen as a little bit under-sophisticated or even of lower education. And under Confucian values, this is not something that Asian societies really like. However, first, I really need to stress that nobody deserves to be discriminated irrespectively of person's education background. And there are some false prejudice. For example, not all of them are of lower education. Indeed, some of them have university degree. However, in their countries, because of economic or other reasons, they really had to emigrate and they came here to Korea. And then I have to highlight the issue of hierarchical treatment of foreigners, meaning that people from West, people a little bit of whiter, fair skin, usually enjoy a little bit better treatment than people from developing countries. And the main reason is because people are somehow evaluated based on the developmental status of their country. This is pretty much false because, as you know, we have so many foreign talents in Korea who are from developing countries, but they contribute to the society in so many brilliant ways. So as a society, I think we have a responsibility to address this issue and to help Korea to thrive.
Yeah. Right, and in light of the contributions by our foreign community here in the country, Lana, I understand that the OECD released a report, I believe, last October, which showed that South Korea is on its way to becoming a multiracial nation this particular year. Before we delve into that further, what are the prerequisites for this title, a multiracial nation?
Yeah, well, I saw the report in question. It says that around 5% of population here in Korea now is of foreign descent. And then this should mean that Korea is multicultural. But Korea indeed became multicultural, but only in terms of quantity, not in terms of quality. To really become a multicultural society, Korea needs to address the issue of multicultural education. To give you one plastic example, there are multiracial children, and very often they suffer from discrimination and from racism in schools. And schools should provide multicultural education not only to children, but to their parents as well. And this should include cross-cultural sensitivity and also peace education. Peace education means conflict resolution and these kind of things. This can help schools to reduce bullying and to reduce violence. You see, Actually, all parents in Korea are interested in this. We all want that our kids grow in safe environment and that they are protected, that they are happy, and one day when they grow up that they can be competitive in globalized and cross-cultural environment. Then there is an issue of equal pay. As you know, there is Equal Pay Act in Korea. It is enacted. However, another OECD report mentioned that there is a 70% gap, gender wage gap in Korea. To test further this premise, I'm collaborating with Sejong University, Tourism Industry Data Analytics Lab. We focus on airline industry, and we found out also the gap between what Korean males earn and what Korean females earn is significant. So as you see, the law is not enough. Definitely as a society, we need to try to do more to address issues of inequality. And this includes also not only foreigners, but treatment towards Korean women and other underprivileged people as well.
Right, of course, which was something that, as Professor Jo mentioned, we had discussed during International Women's Day. Professor Jo, how do you explain South Korea's relatively quick transition, if I may, into a multiracial nation?
Well, I would say mainly two factors: our very low birth rate and the fact that we are a rapidly aging society. Also coupled with that, we have a very highly educated workforce who tend to avoid certain types of work, namely the 3D, the difficult, dirty and dangerous jobs. And we've had to rely on migrant workers to fill those gaps for many years now. And so, as well as migrant brides that we've essentially had to bring in order to find partners for males living in rural communities who are not very popular as choices of life mates. There has been a significant increase in the recent years in terms of migrant population. It's actually quite remarkable because comparing our situation to neighboring Japan, which actually has a longer migration history than Korea, the migrant population in Japan still remains at around 2.5%, whereas if we count undocumented foreign residents in Korea as well, we are already over 5%, well over the OECD definition of multicultural society. So we're still having to adjust, I think, to our image of this multicultural and multiracial society, because for such a long time in our nation's history, we prided ourselves on being a one-race nation. And in fact, the reason why we joined this international convention on the elimination of all forms of racial discrimination back in 1978 was that the policymakers back then and the government didn't believe that race or racial discrimination would ever be an issue in Korea because we were a one-nation country. And so I think they would have had a hard time believing that we would have already become such a multiracial country by this stage.
Right, and that being said then, Zelana, as a multiracial nation here in South Korea, what are your thoughts regarding the country's awareness, if I may, of the importance to fight racial discrimination?
Well, I came to Korea first time in 2008. I earned my master's and PhD degree here, and currently I teach so many international students. And I must say that in the last 15 years, I saw huge change. Korea really became international, and there are so many international people, international students here. But this is primarily in terms of quantity, as I mentioned, not in terms of quality. So when I sit down with my students and when we discuss about troubles that they experience in society and some potential solutions, I'm sometimes surprised because even foreign students, they unfortunately have to cope with some silly prejudice. For example, drug use-based prejudice, prostitution-based prejudice, or coronavirus spreading prejudice. This is all a little bit serious prejudice, and unfortunately, luckily they are false. And unfortunately, brilliant students, they somehow need to cope with these stereotypes and prejudice, etc. There are some lighter ones, for example, that foreign people don't pay taxes, and to cope with this once for all foreigners, all international population who is working here in Korea, we have to pay taxes, we have to pay health deduction and pension deduction. So at the end of the day, like what I'm trying to say is that we as society need to cope with this kind of false prejudice if we want to have truly multicultural, like thriving society. Also, I think foreigners need to be given a chance to speak with their own voice by themselves, not only by Korean activists. Their efforts have been remarkable. However, foreigners, as I say, they know the best what are their experience, and that's why it's very important that they are able to speak by themselves. I would like to provide one suggestion to universities and to NGOs, and that is not just talk about racism and discrimination, but also to try to promote the value of international working force. What we see from other OECD countries is that innovation and development happen as a result of knowledge transfer from international population toward locals. And I sincerely hope seeing this more in future in Korea.
Right, and so do I. Meanwhile, Professor Jo, our Zelana, our Dr. Zemiri, of course, she talked about how laborers, foreign laborers that is, the ones who face 3D jobs, they face a more difficult time here compared to their other counterparts. What can you share with us about the working environment of foreign laborers here in South Korea?
You know, the international NGO Amnesty International released a report entitled Migrant Workers Are Human Beings Too back in 2006. 2 years after the employment permit system was adopted by the Korean government that actually legalized issuing visas for foreign workers coming to Korea. But if you simply, swapped the date from 2006 to 2024, you would still have exactly the same problems that were pointed out in that report existing today. Migrant workers are subject to serious and systemic abuses. Now, we're talking about those migrant workers who are coming to Korea to be engaged in very simple and manual labor, and not the elite, highly educated workers, mostly from rich Western countries that Dr. Zemir also referred to. These migrant workers are limited to certain types of industries where the government has granted issuing of working permits to employers, and they are also restricted to that particular workplace which is in their visa conditions. So from the moment that they actually leave their country of origin as to when they enter Korea, to while they're staying in the country, working, and even departing Korea, they're subject to all sorts of exploitation and discrimination, and very often abuses. So many of them are underpaid in terms of hours not actually being fully counted. So, for example, most of the food that we actually eat every day, the vegetables on our tables, would not be there without the presence of migrant workers. And yet these mostly women laborers from Cambodia work some 10, 12 hours per day, every day, without any break, not even toilet break. And yet they only get paid about 8 hours of work. They pick something like 15,000 sesame leaves each day, and they are often housed in very inadequate accommodation, such as temporary vinyl, covered greenhouse type housing that are, boiling in summer, freezing in winter. Often because they are women, they're subject to more types of exploitation and abuse, such as sexual abuse and harassment from employers. But because of this EPS system, it means that even if they are not paid wages properly and they are subject to abuse, unless they can actually prove this, they're unable to leave their workplace. And so this EPS system, which was actually introduced to protect migrant workers in the initial stages, is actually being used as almost like a indentured servitude type of system that locked them into place. Now, there are workers in other industries, such as fisheries and certain manufacturing and heavy industries, that suffer even higher risks, sometimes even losing their lives. And these problems are constantly pointed out by international society, and yet we are repeating the same kind of mistakes and living with these problems still.
Right, but hopefully we'll learn from our mistakes in the near future. Keeping in mind what Professor Cho has just said, Lana, this year Korea itself, it's supposed to open its doors to 165,000 foreign workers.
Yeah.
That being said, speaking within your capacity, of course, as a scholar, what policies do you suppose need to be put in place to better protect these foreign workers?
So when we talk about foreign workers, now you are talking about foreign 3D workers, and they will be employed in industries such as construction, manufacturing, fishery, and even some service industries. They become open from this year to foreign workers. I first need to highlight why Korea needs this much workers, and this is because all of these industries, they suffer from the lack of workforce. So they simply cannot function without the foreign workforce. And as Professor Cho just mentioned, so they will come to Korea through employee permit system, so-called EPS system, and this system allows them to stay maximum 5 years. They cannot extend, they cannot stay longer even if they want, and they can change employer 3 times within this system. And if they do that, each time they need to have signed written consent from previous employer. So if they were a little bit unlucky, if they have abusive employer, they need to suffer from this, and this is the main reason behind violation of their rights. So this very small thing can be improved within EPS system. Another thing is, like I mentioned, many of them, they would like to extend their stay and stay 5+ years, but they cannot because Korean government wants to prevent their permanent settlement. So they want to stay longer, industries need them. What do? They become undocumented, they become illegal worker. And that is the source of further exploitation. So I would suggest to deal with discrimination, all of these things, to prevent these things, simply to allow them to stay a little bit longer, or to at least consider this. And another issue is the issue of equal pay. As I mentioned, Equal Pay Act exists in Korea. However, obviously it is not enough. We see this because there is gender wage disparity in Korea. According to OECD, roughly 70% across industries. And then with foreign workers, this affects them as well. So if we want to create more competitive, more fairer society, law is necessary, but it will not be enough. We all need to strive to deal with this kind of unfair practices and to create definitely more fairer, better society, not only for immigrants, but for Koreans as well.
Right then. Professor Cho, keeping in mind what our Dr. Zemira has just said then, what do you suggest perhaps, and I understand this might be a very difficult question, but what do you suggest to perhaps spur some tangible action to deal with these very clear problems that we have with regard to racism here in the country?
That is a very difficult question.
It is. It's a $1 million question.
But I know that from personal experience and from eyewitness accounts, racism is not an inherent behavior. It's not something genetically built into us. Young children actually have no concept of race. They don't notice skin color. They don't notice eye color. They don't they notice that they look different, but they don't realize that that's a point of discrimination, or that that's a cause for prejudice, or that they are different. It's a learned, socialized, and a culturalized behavior that is learned and taught by society. And so you only really see racist type of behavior from children after a certain age. And so I think this is why it's really important that adults actually understand and become aware of their racist behavior. Very often we see a lot of Koreans engaging in racist behavior without even realizing that they're being racist. And I think that's because we haven't really had this kind of awareness campaign. So nowadays we know that many older adults have become much more aware of gender equality and acts or words that can constitute, for example, sex discrimination in workplace and in other environments. And so in the same way, I think there should be widespread education against race discrimination as well. In terms of tangible things, one thing that we can definitely do is to really spur on and enact the general anti-discrimination law, which has been languishing in the National Assembly for so many years. And things like restoring the budget to support the migrant worker help centers around the nation. The annual budget for running those support centers was only something like 7.6 billion won, which is like less than $6 million, less than 1/6 of the overseas travel budget allocated for the first couple for this year. Something like those tangible acts can be done as a minimum to, I think, try to combat racism in our society.
Right, indeed. And staying with that, then, what more would you like to add to what Professor Cho has said about dealing with racism here in the country?
Well, I already provided some potential solution, and that is boosting multicultural education, fighting with false prejudice, allowing international people to speak with their own voice about problems they are facing. However, I haven't mentioned perhaps the most important thing, and that is nowadays all countries, all nations, all cities, they try to attract qualified international working force because they know that this is a source of competitiveness in front of the new AI revolution. So they provide favorable immigration policies, scholarships, funding. So Korea has been trying to do the same. However, there have been limitations. And how do I know this limitation? Is because among total immigrant population in Korea, 4% are foreign professionals, and comparatively 8% are foreign students. So you see, there is a reason why foreign students don't want to stay here longer, or why foreign professionals don't want to settle here permanently. And racism, discrimination are one of the reasons. Coping with this issue is absolutely $1 million question, like you mentioned. It will be really challenging. However, at Hanyang University, we already work on this. We try to find adequate solutions. But as scholars, our scholarly works will not be enough. We definitely need support from wider society. And I would just like to emphasize that it is our own responsibility really to try to build up more competitive and more inclusive society for the benefit of all. If we manage to do that, I think Korea will become truly multicultural, not only in terms of quantity, but in terms of quality as well.
All right, quality, as you mentioned earlier. All right, Zelana, Dr. Zimmer, thank you so much for your time and your insights. And Professor Cho, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
Right, well, on that note, we end this week's editions of Issues and Insiders. Have a great weekend. See you same time next Monday.